All right, and we're back with the Stormlight Archives series. We've done over 20 videos on this one series of books so far, and we've now, as hard as it is to believe, reached the end. This is going to be the first video on Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said in the last video, it's kind of flown by. At the same time, it feels like we've put a lot of effort into this, and so hopefully this book will be what we're all expecting and will give us all the payoff. So as we get into the book, we start with the prologue, of course, and I believe we all kind of saw this coming, that we finally get the perspective of Gavilar himself. And it's an interesting perspective. There are some twists that are finally revealed as we get into it. But to start, we just see from the beginning how Machiavellian Gavilar is. We saw a bit of this when we saw it from Navani's perspective, but then just seeing it and being able to hear his own thoughts and see how brutal he is and how he is so caught up in reaching his goals despite everyone else, no matter what. We see that he's dishonorable, and he even treats Dalinar. We might have been holding out some idea, some grace for Gavilar, thinking, well, at least he had this relationship with Dalinar, but no, even still, he treats Dalinar like a pawn, like a tool, just like he treats Navani, his own wife. So just this really disreputable man overall. We see Dalinar is suffering with the loss of his wife Evie, and he's suffering with alcoholism, and we see Gavilar just using him, manipulating him, telling him, what would Evie say if she saw you right now? He knows that this just cuts deep into the heart of Dalinar, and then he follows that up by saying, hey, just as a reminder, you shouldn't drink tonight. So he stabs him through the heart and then plants the idea of, hey, you could go drink to forget about the pain that I just caused you. And this is how he deals with Dalinar and how he gets him to just go away. Perhaps the biggest twist of it all, though, is that we see that Gavilar originally had bonded the Stormfather, and he wanted to become a herald so that he could guarantee power. He wants to be immortal so that he could be king forever. And the Stormfather says, yes, but you need to understand how painful it is, essentially, to carry this oath pact. And even all of the other heralds, they've all given in at some point. And it's at this point that we see Gavilar's true intentions in doing this. He says, why stay and be tortured and potentially lose my mind? I will give up each time and return immediately. The heralds stay in damnation to seal the Voidbringers away, to prevent them from overrunning the world. This is the Stormfather rebutting what he was saying. And he says, the heralds are the 10 fools for that. If I cannot die, I will be the greatest king this world has ever known. Why lock away my knowledge and leadership to stop the war? Why would I care to stop a war? War is the path to glory, to training our soldiers to recover the Tranquiline halls. My troops should be experienced, don't you think? I don't fear these Voidbringers. Let them stay and fight. If they are reborn, then we will never run out of enemies to kill. He has the idea that he'll go to damnation every time he dies, and he'll just give in and return immediately to keep this war going forever, to keep churning out soldiers. They'll always have someone to fight against. He'll always have a war to fight as the king, and he perceives this as his option, that he thinks that he can become a herald, that he'll convince the Stormfather in the first place, and that he can be king forever and be in this constant war that fulfills, his goals. And it's at the end, when he meets his end at the hands of Szeth, that we see from the first prologue all the way back at the beginning of the Way of the King, all the way back at the beginning in the Way of Kings, when he's dying, he says, they must not get it. Tell my brother he must find the most important words a man can say. For all this time, we thought that he was telling Szeth that. And I remember even thinking at the time, it's interesting that he puts any sort of trust in the assassin that comes in the night to kill him, but we see that we just didn't have the full picture, and he was actually speaking to the Stormfather, who stood, unbeknownst to Szeth, right behind him in those final moments. So that's the prologue, and it really sets the stage for this final book. As we move forward into day 1 of the final 10 days, we start off with a picture of Cal. We see that he's actually doing better. Once again, like we said in the last video, not completely healed all at once. Shallan later in this same part of the book goes on to say healing is not an event, but it's a process. So we were right on the mark with that. And we see that Cal is doing better. He's improving. He's playing with Oradin, and he even thinks, wow, what am I doing? There's 10 days remaining, and here I am, playing with my younger brother. I feel like I should be doing something more. We have some more interesting dialogue around that idea in particular, and it comes when Cal is speaking with Wit. He's talking with Wit. They talk about different things. They talk about art. Wit says essentially art exists to be made. He mentions how Cal is going to become a therapist, and Cal's like, I don't know what that means. He's like, yeah, that's because you haven't finished inventing it yet. So I think it's funny and ironic that the book has gone in this direction for Kaladin. And then finally, we see Wit saying, have you ever wondered who you would be if there was no one you needed to save, no one you needed to kill? You've lived for others for so long, Kaladin. What happens when you try living for you? I know you can't answer yet. Go and find out. And with that, Wit leaves Cal to ponder this question. Who would he really be if he lived for himself, if he didn't wrap himself up in always trying to take care of someone else or trying to remove some other obstacle, but actually spent some time focusing on Kaladin himself? And I think is what we've been waiting to see for a long time in the books. We also see that Syl is continuing to develop and continuing to grow in her strength. It was mentioned in the last book that she was learning how to change colors of her appearance, but she had a hard time changing the color of the clothing that she was wearing, and now she's able to do that. And even more impressive, we see that she's able to exert a physical influence on physical objects in this realm. And she does this by lifting a pen, albeit a light one, but still lifting a pen and actually writing on paper, showing Kaladin that she could be a scribe for him if she's able to develop this skill further. So it's really impressive. Syl continues to be one of my favorite characters. And then we go on to see Adolin and Shallan. They are finally making their way back from Shadesmar. They've got a bit of a journey to get to the Oathgate that will take them back to the physical realm, and on their way they have to fight and fight and fight just to get there. They make it to the Oathgate. The Spren that run the Oathgate are ambivalent, we could say, about whether or not to side with the humans or with the Singers, with the Fused. They see enemy forces gathering in Shadesmar and approaching, trying to make their way to the Oathgate as well, so they can see the writing on the walls, so to speak, of what's to come. And they make their way back to the physical world. They meet with Kaladin, who has a final goodbye, as far as we can tell at this point, with Adolin and Shallan, as he's going on with Szeth to Shinovar. And he's doing this because Dalinar is sending him. He wants him to go and to find Ishi, because if you remember back to the last book, Dalinar says Ishi is a bondsmith as well. And if anyone knows how to teach Dalinar to reach his fullest potential as a bondsmith and find any keys that there may be in terms of being able to defeat Odium, then it would be Ishi. But he needs Kaladin to go back to Shinovar to find him and hopefully to report back with any information. But Ishi is said to have gone mad like many of the other heralds at this point. And another interesting piece of this entire picture is that Kaladin is taking Szeth with him. So we see that they were mortal enemies in the beginning, and we even talked about it back when they first faced off, how there are some parallels between them, and now we see them actually working cohesively together on this mission for Dalinar. So this series has been really interesting in how there have been no truly bad characters and truly good characters. There have been real characters, real people that have good and bad within them, and that's constantly struggling. So we've seen it multiple times now where characters that are at one point in the story opposed to each other then have to come together and work together for the greater good to reach their goals that they find actually overlap. And so this series has just been really mature in that way, in writing a story that shows the struggle on an intrapersonal dynamic rather than an interpersonal dynamic only. So as we wrap up the end of day one, we see that Kaladin and Szeth are off riding the storm to Shinovar. So we look forward to seeing what will come of that, if they'll be successful in their mission. And we move on to the interludes, which I'll cover here. We have just a couple interludes after the first day. And in one, we see that Taravangian is getting philosophical when discussing how to run the world. What is the proper way to set up the system that allows free will to exist? He's frustrated with how much suffering comes out of a system in which free will is at the foundation of everything. And he's being warned that he should not meddle with this fundamental system of the reality on Roshar too much. But his hubris is grounded in his intelligence. And he thinks that he can think of a better way to implement this. And that if only he could temper or attenuate the amount of free will, then the beings that exist here could still have some amount of free will, but hopefully avoid a lot of the negative outcomes that come along with that. This is something that we even struggle with in reality, where we want people to have total freedom, but then we don't want people to be able to suffer at their own hands whenever they make bad decisions. So people in some ways kind of want to have their cake and eat it too, where they want people to be able to do whatever they want, as long as it results in a net positive. But if they do something of their own volition that results in a negative, then they want all of these systems in place to make up for that and to fix the problem on that individual's behalf. And this is fundamentally opposed. It's a juxtaposition, but it's something that we even struggle with in real life. So it's just another example of Brandon Sanderson pulling in aspects of reality, some of the more fundamental struggles that humans face, and infusing it into the story here. So we see Taravangian struggling with that, and we see that cultivation is continually warning him, don't meddle with these things that you do not fully understand too much, because you don't understand what could happen as a consequence. And cultivation is archetype as the ancient mother nature, potential birth, the origin of life. And she's saying that the chaotic system that gives birth to all of this is beyond your understanding despite your intellect. So don't let your hubris of how intelligent you presume yourself to be convince you that you could come up with a better way to implement something as fundamental as free will within the existence of the beings here in this in Roshar, or perhaps within the Cosmere overall. So it's a really beautiful and overarching theme of the story exemplified in that interlude. The other interlude depicts Kalek, which I think will become more important as the book goes on, because we see that now that Adolin and Shallan have left, Kalek has been captured by the Ghost Blood. So we'll see what comes of that as we move forward in the book. Overall, I feel like that's a pretty good summary of the first day. And so we'll move on with the series. We'll take it a day at a time until we wrap it up entirely. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like it if you did. And I'll see you back for day 2. As always, thanks for your time watching. I'll see you in the next one.